The fluorescent hum of the library was the only sound. Two men sat across a wooden table, one holding a leather notebook, the other with his hands motionless. The first man, a physicist, was explaining a concept so intricate that his own graduate students would have needed a week to follow it. The second man listened without blinking, and then he asked a question that rewired the first man's entire framework. Here is what nobody talks about. The second man had never taken a formal physics course. He was the janitor. If that story landed like a silent recognition of your own experience, you already know what it means to be the one holding a question nobody else has asked. Subscribe to follow this investigation into the hidden architecture of how minds truly work. Not the superficial myths, but the recursive mechanics beneath. And drop the word janitor in the comments if you have ever walked into a room where everyone assumed you had nothing to contribute. You believe that intelligence is a fixed ceiling. You believe that when you walk into a room full of geniuses, you are the dumbest person there because you lack the raw processing power. But consider this. The brain does not operate on raw power alone. It operates on a set of filters, thresholds, and recursive loops that determine what signals it lets through and what it discards as noise. If you have ever been underestimated in a debate, you know the quiet burn of knowing more than you are given credit for. That burn is not a failure. It is a signal that your cognitive lens is tuned to a different frequency than the room. The problem begins with how we measure intelligence. The Terman longitudinal study began in 1921, identifying 1,500 gifted children with IQs above 140. Terman expected them to become the future geniuses of America. But follow the data. The highest achievers came not from the highest IQ scores, but from those who combined high ability with a specific cognitive trait the study did not measure. The ability to hold two contradictory models in the mind simultaneously and tolerate the friction without rushing to resolve it. Now, consider what happens when you enter a room full of people who cannot tolerate that friction. They mistake your silence for absence. When the smartest person in the room decides to stay silent, they are not being arrogant. They are measuring the gap. The Duncker candle problem demonstrates this precisely. Subjects are given a candle, a box of tacks, and a match, and told to attach the candle to the wall without wax dripping on the floor. Most people try to tack the candle directly. The solution requires emptying the box, tacking it to the wall, and using it as a shelf. The cognitive error is functional fixedness. The box is seen only as a container, not a platform. Now imagine this in a high-ability room. The geniuses are generating solutions rapidly, but they are all using the same container. You are the one who sees the empty box. But the room does not ask you. It assumes you have nothing to offer because you are not speaking fast enough. The gap is not your deficit. It is your filter. You have felt this. The moment when the system rewards speed over depth, and you are the only one who notices. The Amabel intrinsic motivation experiments showed that groups rewarded for speed produced more solutions, but the solutions were shallow. Groups given unstructured time produced fewer solutions, but each one held a higher density of transferable insight. The genius room is structured for speed. You're walking in with a structural preference for depth. You're not behind. You are at a different layer of the operation. If you recognized your own cognitive rhythm in that description of depth over speed, you are not alone. This is exactly the kind of pattern this channel maps. Subscribe to Stay with the next piece of the framework, because we have only begun to trace the lens that operates beneath the room's surface. In the comments, write layers if you have ever felt slow because you were processing at a different structural level. Here's the mechanism. The Csikszentmihalyi flow studies found that optimal cognitive states occur when challenge slightly exceeds skill. But this assumes a single track of skill. In reality, you have multiple cognitive layers. The surface layer performs pattern recognition at conversational speed. The deep layer performs recursive analysis, testing assumptions, checking for blind spots, mapping the architecture of the problem itself. When the room functions on the surface layer, you're reading the structural blueprint. That is why you feel slow. You're not processing the same object. Tesla could visualize a working turbine in his mind, every bolt, every stress point, before he touched a tool. He described it as a kinesthetic lens, not a visual one. He felt the machine rotating inside his own joints. When he presented this to engineers at a corporate R&D lab, they dismissed him because he could not produce a blueprint in the format they expected. The lens they used filtered out the signal he was transmitting. The lens you use filters out what the room considers relevant. The question is not whether you belong. The question is whether you are willing to stay silent long enough for the pattern to become visible to everyone else. The higher PET scan studies revealed the neural efficiency paradox. When novice subjects performed a cognitive task, their brains lit up across multiple regions. When expert subjects performed the same task, their brains showed reduced activation, specifically in the prefrontal cortex. The experts were using fewer resources because their cognitive architecture had optimized the pathway. They were not thinking harder. They were thinking with less friction. The dumbest person in the room is often the one whose brain is working hardest, because they have not yet compressed the pattern into a single neural shortcut. You are not less capable. You are in an earlier stage of the same optimization curve. Einstein did not get his best ideas in the lab. He got them while shaving. The act of disengagement from focused problem-solving allowed his default mode network to synthesize disparate information into a new model. The genius room demands constant output. It mistakes production for progress. You are the one who pauses. You are the one who lets the data settle. The gap between you and the room is not a gap in ability. It is a gap in operating system design. But here's the thing that nobody tells you. The cost of this lens is concrete. The Karpinski survey of 3,715 Mensa members found that 23% reported anxiety disorders, nearly double the national average. 19% reported depressive disorders. The lens that lets you see patterns others miss also lets you see structural flaws in every system you inhabit. You see the gaps in the argument, the inefficiency in the process, the blind spot in the leader's strategy. And you are expected to pretend they do not exist. That friction accumulates. The path of distance is not simply a quote from Nietzsche. It is the lived reality of anyone who holds a cathedral in the dark. If this cost resonates with you, subscribe so you do not miss the rest of this blueprint. We are mapping the full architecture of the quiet mind. Leave the word cathedral in the comments if you are building something you cannot yet show the room. The Nietzsche pathos of distance describes the psychological chasm between those who create new values and those who merely inherit existing ones. You are not trying to prove superiority. You are trying to hold a space where a new pattern can emerge without being crushed by the room's need for consensus. The quiet ones in the corner are not hiding. They are building a cathedral in the dark, and they do not need applause to know the architecture is sound. Your next step is not a louder argument. It is sharper silence. The lens is not given. It is built, one exclusion at a time, starting with the need to be heard second before you are understood first. The room will not change, but you can stop apologizing for the gap. You're not waiting for permission. You are waiting for the pattern to surface. It always does.